right, so let's just jump into this now and talk a little bit about this executive order. This executive order would require a proof of citizenship, and I know that states, via the Constitution, states have their own rights to create their own election laws. Is that correct? So, would there be a constitutional issue with the requirement of citizenship at a federal level?
There are two problems, at least, with the executive order. Um, and the question of whether the federal government can require proof of citizenship in a federal election is the most complicated of those two issues. The simpler issue is the President of the United States simply does not have authority to control elections, whether at the state level or the federal level, by simply issuing an executive order. Congress has some power to control federal elections, but that requires a majority vote in both the House and the Senate. It would certainly be easier and perhaps more efficient if a president could simply pass laws by decree with the stroke of a pen, but that would not be a constitutional democracy, which is what the United States is supposed to be. The president is required to take care that the law is faithfully executed. There is a federal law governing federal elections, and the president is doing the exact opposite of taking care to enforce that law. He's trying to change that law, and he's trying to do it as if he were a dictator. So I'm not sure that the intricacies of the specific provisions of the executive order will ever find its way into a court to be reviewed, because as a starting point, the president simply doesn't have the authority to do what he purports to do.
And so I know this executive order also deals with mail-in voting too, and it would require these mail-in votes come in the day of the election. Any of those mail-in votes that come in after the day of the election would not count. And so I'm just wondering, what does this mean for our state elections where we have these mail-in ballots, as long as they were postmarked at the end of the election day?
It's likely that state law will control the question of what mail-in ballots can and cannot be counted. Again, Congress could try to impose regulations such as this executive order purports to do. That would raise some pretty complex questions of the line between the federal government's ability to control federal elections and the general authority that states have to control their own elections. There's not really a federal presidential election. There is a series of 50 different state elections that lead to the selection of the president. But again, that's a hypothetical question, given the fact that the only thing that's happened now is that the president has purported to change the law. That's Congress's job. It's not the president's job.
And so I know you just said that the federal election is not its own election. It's 50 different state elections that eventually elect the president. There's no scenario where we could have state elections that just decide state issues, and then we do have a new federal election that would, that's not any way possible, is it?
I can't speculate about that. If I had a law passed by the House and the Senate and signed by the president, then we could look at the substantive provisions in that law to determine whether they run afoul of the Constitution. And I'm sure there would be challenges to any attempt to do what this executive order does, but we're not there yet, because this is no different than if I issued an order that said the same thing. He has no more authority than me or you to control federal elections.
And so for our viewers, can you just tell me where this goes from here? Where's the next challenge? Or is it going to be the Attorney General filing a lawsuit for this to enter the courts? Will courts just challenge this immediately? How does this all work after this executive order is issued?
Well, I think that it's almost certain to be challenged, and states such as the state of Oregon, through the Attorney General, could be a part of that challenge, could be brought by others who have standing as well. I expect there will be a raft of challenges. In the meantime, the real danger in what the president has done is that there are likely states out there that are solidly red, that will simply follow the president's directions, and they're not legally obligated to do so. But that's the real risk, is that voters' right to vote in presidential elections, by requiring proof of citizenship and that sort of thing, will be significantly diluted because of the tendency that some have to comply in advance of determination that the law is actually valid.
So just so my understanding correct, you're likely saying, or you're saying that these Republican states will likely just follow this order and comply with these types of laws and possibly change state laws just based on just following what the president says.
Yeah, I don't know that any state will do that, but I think that's a real risk.
And so just my last question for you, really appreciate your time. Could you just add any additional information that our viewers should know about this executive order, about how these work in general, and then just states' voting rights in general, or the state's role in voters' rights in Oregon? If that makes any sense.
I'm not quite sure that I
Yeah,
have
yeah, sorry,
anything
sorry.
to
Can you
add.
just provide any additional info? Sorry, I was trying to complete that question in my head, but can you just give any additional information to our viewers surrounding the potential of changes to federal election laws?
Well, I know that there are bills that have been introduced in Congress already that would affect the conduct of federal elections. I don't know the specifics, and of course, what is introduced can look very different from what is ultimately enacted. And passing a law is by design a difficult thing, much, much harder than simply signing an executive order that somebody puts in front of you. So there may be changes in the offing, but it will require the full legislative process for that to happen.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Bill. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, you too.
Yep.